Stranger's stuff is just trash, Haga. If you don't like it, get out, Haga. My husband, John, was illuminated by the flames, grinning maliciously. Burning before his eyes were children's toys and clothes. They are keepsakes of my son. John was burning these precious memories in our backyard, as if to flaunt them in front of me. A dark emotion begins to surge in my heart. It is anger and hatred. I will not forgive him. John, who hurt Jack and mocked his death. And my mother-in-law, who stole Jack's precious time from him. I will have my revenge. I don't care what happens anymore. Without anything left to protect, I am invincible. I will stake my all to send them both to hell. Leave the house. I had planned it from the start. Okay. I answered with a beaming smile. About 2 weeks had passed since Jack's death. I received a phone call. It was from John. He had called many times, but I ignored all of them. He's a stranger to me now. I have no obligation to leave for him. But even after a month, 2 months, the calls kept coming incessantly, and I had a premonition. Maybe something happened to the two of them. With a bit of expectation, I decided to answer the phone. What's wrong, John? Please, help me. John shouted in a frantic voice. My mom, something terrible has happened to her. I slightly loosened my lips into a smile. My name is Mary. I'm a 33-year-old stay-at-home mom. I'm home. My son Jack returns home, carrying his backpack. I greeted him at the entrance. Welcome home, Jack. There's pudding in the fridge, you can have one. Just one. Jack is in 3rd grade this year, but he's still very much a child and a bit of a mama's boy. The rest is for Grandma to eat. Everyone gets one. Man, before we moved, they were all mine. I wish we never came to this house. Just as I was about to cover Jack's mouth, a shrill voice echoed from behind. Hey, Mary, you haven't finished cleaning yet, have you? Jack, you're supposed to study in your room when you get home, aren't you? Hurry up. As we stood frozen, my mother-in-law clicked her tongue in annoyance. Really, this is why I was against marrying a divorced woman, and to bring along such a poorly behaved stepchild. She continued to hurl her disdain towards Jack and I. I am divorced, with an ex-husband. Jack is my child from that marriage. I divorced my ex-husband when Jack was 3 years old. The cause was my ex-husband's affair. Since then, I've been raising Jack all by myself. I worked tirelessly, day and night, for our life together, and for Jack's future. I thought I could handle it because I was young. But then, like a tightly stretched string snapping, I collapsed in exhaustion. The cause was overwork. I felt deep regret and despair. What should I do now? Work to live, collapse, then work again. Is this going to be my life forever? That's when my current husband, John, appeared. I met John in the hospital where I was admitted. I was shopping in the hospital store with Jack when Jack started throwing a tantrum, wanting to buy candy. That's when John appeared and said, I'll buy it for you, buddy. Which candy do you want? I tried to stop him in a panic, but John said just this once, and bought Jack the candy. John was visiting a friend in the hospital, and had stopped by the store on a whim. I really love kids. I like seeing them happy and playful. I also find their complaining and tantrums cute. When I see them, I just can't help but spoil them. John was a kind-hearted man, and Jack, having received the candy, became completely attached to him. See you again, mister. Then, by chance, the next time Jack came to the hospital, we ran into John again at the store. Once more, John bought Jack some candy. As this continued, I naturally began to trust John. No mother could resist someone who shows such affection for her son. Then one day Jack said, "Hey mister, I want you to be my dad. Mom and I are struggling with money." Jack probably saw John, who always bought him candy, as some kind of wealthy hero. I scolded Jack for his impolite remark, but when I saw John calmly smiling at this, I started to see him in a new light. A year later, I married John. He was 10 years older, but his maturity gave me a sense of security and trust. John was truly a wealthy man. He held an executive position in his grandfather's company, being groomed as the next CEO. The company was a top manufacturer in the U.S. A divorced woman who struck gold in marriage. I sensed that John's relatives, especially my mother-in-law, saw me that way. Today, our family starts living with my mother-in-law. This was because John's father passed away, and John was chosen as the new president. My mother-in-law suggested we support John together. There was also another reason. My mother-in-law said she wanted to teach a lot to Jack, who would one day take over the company. When I saw the grand, old-fashioned mansion, my heart raced with the thought of living there. "Come on, don't just stand there, Mary, you clean, Jack, study, get moving." Standing before my mother-in-law, who was clapping orders, I felt overwhelmed with anxiety about our new life. At 4 in the morning, I was in the kitchen. Last night, my mother-in-law insisted that I prepare breakfast at this time. After making breakfast, I woke her up. Rubbing her sleepy eyes, she came to the kitchen. "How about this, mother-in-law?" She crossed her arms in front of the breakfast I had prepared. And then she sighed. "I can't believe it. Bread for breakfast, that's unheard of in this house. You must have gone out of your way to buy it." I peeked at my irritated mother-in-law's face. "Would you have preferred traditional Japanese food?" "Preferred? It's obvious that rice is the staple for Japanese, isn't it? Rice, fish, and miso soup. That's the basics. Did you know that wheat is poison for Japanese people?" She looked at me with a sharp gaze. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. You see, wheat doesn't suit the Japanese body. It harms our brains. You do know that wheat was imported into Japan as part of an American conspiracy, right?" "No, I didn't know that." "Sigh, young people these days just watch TV all the time. That's why they're so easily brainwashed. Read books. You'll become dumb otherwise." I bowed my head to my mother-in-law. "Thank you for teaching me. From now on, I'll prepare Japanese-style breakfasts. Playing the good girl won't cut it." My mother-in-law pointed at the breakfast. "Remake this, and quickly." "Nah." As I stood there dumbfounded, my mother-in-law grinned slyly. "Lucky for you, there's still plenty of time before John and Jack wake up. Be grateful." Grateful for having time. I thought for a moment and then asked her. "So, you mean to say you gave me time to remake it?" "Yes, that's right. I had expected this from a commoner who's been divorced." She nodded proudly. That meant she had set the time with the expectation that I would have to remake the breakfast. I thought it was strange to be up this early. "And that bread, fried eggs, and salad for 4, you eat it, don't waste food, okay?" "Nah." My mother-in-law, irritated by my lack of immediate response, clapped her hands in front of me. "Hurry up." "Bah." Startled by her shouting right next to my ear, I shrank back. A wife in our family must support the home and the employees it produces. I'm trying to teach you how to do that. Open the fridge and start cooking. I'll make you redo it until you make a breakfast worthy of our house. My mother-in-law yelled this right into my ear. Overwhelmed by her commotion, I quickly opened the fridge and took out the ingredients. Lately, I've hardly been able to have a conversation with Jack. When Jack comes home, he has to study with a tutor, followed by English lessons. My mother-in-law arranged all this on her own, saying he must prepare to take over the company. Jack has no time to play with friends, eat snacks, or relax at home. I had repeatedly asked my mother-in-law to give us some free time, but she never listened. One day, while making dinner, I received a message from John. Yes, wondering if you could do that insider thing. Insider. Confused by the sudden use of the word, I tilted my head. I sent the wrong message. Delete that. John's panic made me feel uneasy. I deleted it. I texted John back, but decided not to delete the message just yet. The word insider rang a bell, so I thought I'd do a little research on it later. That night, when John came home, he was in a great mood. He took me with a spring in his step to Jack's room. "Jack, how did the test go today?" Jack was studying with his tutor. Jack stopped his study and took out a larger than usual test paper from his backpack. Facing an expectant John, Jack had a downcast expression. "Here." John took the test paper. The score was 95. Seeing this, John, without losing his gentle smile, crumpled the test paper. "Jack." "Yes." 95 points, well, it's not bad. For an ordinary person, that is. But you're special. You have the potential to be the successor of one of Japan's leading companies. Do you understand what that means? Jack stumbled over his words. John's smile vanished, and his eyes widened in anger. "I've told you before, you must be perfect. This family accepts nothing less than 100 points. If you can't remember something that important, you don't deserve to be part of this family." "I'm sorry." Jack was trembling all over. I grabbed John's arm and pulled him into the hallway. "Hey, you're being too harsh. Jack is your son. He's family, right? Are you saying he needs to be qualified to count as family?" When I confronted him directly, John looked puzzled and tilted his head. "Huh, that's what family is. Each member fulfills their role to protect a legacy that has been passed down for generations. Women must be perfect in household duties. Men must be perfect in their jobs to protect the company. If you can't do that, you're not recognized as family. That's because you're not useful to the family. Such people are just like strangers. Isn't that obvious?" I was at a loss for words. "That's not what family is. Jack's being treated like a tool. I can't take it anymore. I just can't." Jack's screams came from his room. When I rushed in, Jack was throwing pencils and workbooks at his tutor. "I don't want to study anymore. I can't remember all this. I'm just a bad kid. Dad just hates me." Jack was crying and screaming. "Jack." I hugged Jack tightly. "It's okay, Jack. It's all going to be okay now." While soothing my crying sons back, I was firm in my decision. "I can't stay here anymore. I'm going to get a divorce." I had been secretly preparing for the divorce. I knew that after the divorce, life would be harder, and I'd probably have to work from morning till night. It's unavoidable. I am a mother. For my son, any hardship is worth it. I reaffirmed my decision. Then, suddenly, Jack started experiencing some problems. He seemed lethargic in the mornings and didn't want to go to school. Probably exhausted from studying, I decided to let Jack rest. The doctor suggested that Jack's lethargy was due to stress-induced anemia and prescribed iron supplements. However, his fatigue didn't improve even after 1 week, then 2. I took Jack to a university hospital. After the examination, the doctor informed me, "Your son has leukemia. The fatigue and anemia are symptoms of leukemia, but the local doctors probably didn't suspect it." My mind went blank. "And there's something else. Your son has acute leukemia. It progresses quickly, so he must be hospitalized immediately and start treatment." The doctor delivered this news with a grim face. The progression was rapid. I didn't want to think about what those words meant. There was no time to prepare for a divorce. I informed my mother-in-law and John about Jack's condition, and told them I would be by his side. Then, my mother-in-law made a disdainful face. You know, it's pretty obvious that Jack is going to pass away, isn't it? You should prioritize the housework for the sake of those of us who will continue to live. Mom's right, that's your role, Mary. They seem like people from a different world to me. Now that I had decided to divorce, I didn't care about them anymore. I packed up Jack's belongings, as well as my own, and left the house. I devotedly supported Jack's hospitalization. But despite my efforts, Jack passed away just 6 months after being admitted. It was so sudden. His end came too suddenly. Just before he took his last breath, Jack said in a faint voice, "Mama." "What is it, Jack? What's wrong?" Amidst the watchful eyes of the doctor and nurses, Jack smiled, as if a bright future awaited him beyond this moment. "When I get discharged, I want to play a lot, with friends, play games, and eat lots of pudding. Mama, is that okay?" I couldn't stop my tears. Of course, Jack. Even such a modest dream didn't come true. Ever since Jack passed away, I've been in a daze, feeling time passing by so quickly. Today, I finished Jack's funeral. Gone home. When I returned to the mansion alone, I could smell something burning coming from somewhere in the house. When I went to the garden, I found John, who had returned home earlier, sitting there, burning something. What was burning in front of him were children's toys, clothes, the keepsakes of my son. "What are you doing?" I couldn't comprehend the scene before me. "Just burning some trash." John said it as if it were the most natural thing. "That's not trash, those are Jack's belongings." John chuckled softly. Jack, told me he was just a stranger who couldn't fulfill his role in this house. His face, illuminated by the flames, was tinged red. John wore a malicious smile. "Stranger stuff is just trash. If you don't like it, get out." Seeing his face, I finally understood. This is his true nature. At the same time, emotions that had been dulled since I lost Jack began to resurface. They were anger and hatred. I can't forgive this. John, who hurt Jack and mocked his death. And my mother-in-law, who stole Jack's precious time from him. I'll have my revenge. It doesn't matter what happens anymore. I have nothing left to protect anymore. I'll stake everything I have to drag those two down to hell. Told to leave the house. That was my intention from the start. Sure thing. I answered with a broad smile. I divorced John. John himself handed me the divorce papers. He must have prepared them as soon as he realized Jack wouldn't bend to his will. We were, after all, just tools for his family. 2 weeks had passed since Jack's death. Every day, I spoke to Jack's photo, advancing my plans for revenge. Then, I received a call from John. He had called several times, but I ignored all of them. He's a stranger to me now. I don't owe him the courtesy of leaving. But as the calls kept coming incessantly, for a month, then 2 months, I began to suspect something. Maybe something had happened to them. With a bit of hope, I decided to answer the phone. "What's wrong, John?" "Help, please!" John shouted in a frantic voice. Mom's in trouble." I allowed a slight smile to form on my lips. Trying not to be noticed, I feigned concern in my voice. What do you mean in trouble?" "She's been acting odd for a while now, slurred speech, unable to talk properly, and when we went to the hospital." John's voice trembled as he spoke. "Mom had a stroke, she was hospitalized and treated. But now she's bedridden, and I'm taking care of her at home. I thought about using caregiving services, but Mom doesn't want to be a burden on strangers, but I'm at my limit. I'm tired from work and next week I have a business trip, so." John said in a half-laughing voice, "Could you come back, even if it's just for a short period? We'd live together, And Mom says it's okay if it's you, Mary. I couldn't help but laugh at the sheer absurdity. This is all about my mother-in-law. She must be planning to exploit me again. But after a bit of thought, I said, "That sounds tough. I do owe your mother a lot. It's my turn to return the favor." "Thank you, Mary." John seemed to be crying with joy. I'm looking forward to when those tears turn to sorrow. I returned to the family mansion and took care of my bedridden mother-in-law. "Here's your breakfast. Bread with a fried egg and a salad." I pressed the bread against my mother-in-law's mouth. She opened her eyes wide in refusal, but being bedridden, she couldn't resist. Now, you can't be picky. Even Jack could eat bread." I forced the bread into her mouth. However, she never swallowed it, her mouth bulging with bread, struggling in distress. Tears welled in her eyes. "Stop it. Mother-in-law, what's the matter?" "My brain." My mother-in-law tried desperately to communicate with her faltering speech. It seems she truly believes those conspiracy theories that wheat harms the brain. I forgot, eating bread will damage your brain even more, won't it? But that doesn't matter. After all, it's pretty obvious that you're going to pass away soon." I let out a small laugh. My mother-in-law glared at me resentfully. I clapped my hands loudly in front of my mother-in-law. "Come on, quick, swallow what's in your mouth, don't just sit there." I shouted right into her ear. Startled, my mother-in-law spat out the bread. She coughed and choked. I picked up the bread from the floor and brought the dirty piece to her mouth. "Come on, mother-in-law, you can't do this. Didn't you say it yourself?" I pushed the bread into my mother-in-law's mouth. "Wasting food is not allowed," my mother-in-law shouted in a muffled voice. Every day, I made her eat bread. Morning, noon, and night. If she spat it out, I put it back in her mouth. Repeating this for hours. In an environment with no help. Either my mother-in-law lost the will to resist, or after a week, she obediently started swallowing the bread. My mother-in-law has become completely exhausted, now spending her days trembling in bed. Whenever I appear, she lets out a frightened gasp. A month later, John returned from his business trip. When I greeted him at the entrance, John's face lit up with a smile upon seeing me. "Thanks, Mary. Taking care of Mom must have been tough, huh?" I smiled gently. "It's all right. After all, she's the mother of the man I loved. I see it as my duty as an ex-wife." "Mary, you finally understand." John, with tears welling up in his eyes, approached me. I quickly dodged and headed towards the living room. "Dinner is ready. Your mother is asleep right now, so let's eat together." "Oh, I'm looking forward to it. There's nothing better than coming home from work to a meal." I gave a wry smile at this conversation, reminiscent of newlyweds. Right after we said our thanks and were about to eat, a sound like a woman's groan could be heard. "Oh, looks like your mother woke up." John and I headed towards the room where the mother-in-law was. Upon seeing us, the mother-in-law opened her mouth wide and said, "Ma, John." "What's wrong, Mom?" John moved closer to her bed. "You useless, get out." The mother-in-law glared at me. John frowned. "What are you talking about, Mom? Mary has been taking care of you all this time, right? She even cleaned the house so beautifully and made your room spotless. You should be grateful." "No, it's not that." I had meticulously erased all evidence of feeding the mother-in-law bread. "Listen, Mary even cooked my dinner. She fulfilled her role admirably. And what about you, Mom? All you do is lie in bed all day. If anyone's useless, it's you." Tears filled the mother-in-law's eyes. Frustrated that her intentions weren't being understood, the mother-in-law began to let out indistinct screams. The sound was so intense it felt like it could burst eardrums. "Shut up, be quiet," John yelled, his face turning red with anger. As the two began to hurl insults at each other, I watched and chuckled softly behind John's back. I left the mansion. While they were arguing, I took my pre-packed bags and left the house. Of course, I got a call from John right away. "Why did you leave, Mary?" I said with tears in my voice. "But your mother-in-law told me to leave, despite all the hard work I put into taking care of her. Look, Mom's emotionally unstable. Please, I can't handle her anymore. I'm sorry, I'm just so tired. I really loved your mom, but to see her change like that, it's too painful." Mary. John must have deeply sympathized with my lie. He fell silent, as if lost in thought. "When I've sorted things out, I'll come by again. Can I keep the key?" "Bah, yes, of course." "Thank you, dear." I hung up the phone. Then, one day, half a year later, I was at the family's mansion again, carrying a large trash bag. I entered my mother-in-law's room and rummaged through her dresser. I filled the bag with clothes and accessories she loved, designer items, and luxury goods. Once done, I flung open all the doors and shelves in the room, grabbing mementos of her and John, stuffing them into the bag one after another. Shouldering the heavy bag, I headed to the yard. I dumped its contents on the ground and lit them with a lighter from my pocket. The smell of burning filled the air, as my mother-in-law's cherished memories quickly turned to ash. Then, I heard a noise from the entrance. "Mary, are you there?" John's weary voice came through. I greeted him at the entrance. "Welcome home. Sorry, I came back early, just wasn't feeling well." "It's okay, I'm struggling too. To think Mom would pass away like that." Today was the funeral of my mother-in-law. After I left the mansion, John took care of his mother but couldn't balance it with work, so he was almost forced to put her in a facility. Soon after, she rapidly lost weight and started showing symptoms similar to depression. Even when John visited, she wouldn't even attempt to speak. Her last moments were in the facility's bed. In the morning, a staff member came to check on her and found she had already passed away. The doctor said the cause was likely a recurrence of a stroke. I gently rubbed John's back to comfort him. "How about we have some tea in the garden for a change of scenery?" "Thank you, Mary." John looked at me with tearful eyes. I took his hand and headed towards the garden. "What's that smell?" The moment the garden came into view, John was dumbstruck, probably at the sight of his mother's belongings being burnt to ashes. "A bonfire. Mary, what are you doing?" John asked with a half-smile. I enlightened the oblivious John. "I'm burning trash, can't you see? It's all your mother's belongings." I said it as if it were the most natural thing. "Trash? What are you talking about? Those are Mom's cherished memories. Why would you do this?" I was surprised to see John lose his composure. "Why do you get so heated? They're not someone else's things. A stranger. Mom was family." I tilted my head at John's remark. "Didn't you say it yourself, that your mother was useless? If she can't fulfill her role in the house, she's a stranger, right?" I smiled sweetly. "Strangers' belongings are trash, so I burned them." John lunged at me. "Don't joke around. It's unforgivable to burn someone's belongings without permission." "Then why don't you save them? It looks like not everything has burned yet." Startled, John's eyes widened, and in a moment of shock, he plunged his hand into the fire. He must have been panicking from the shock. John tried to grab his mother's belongings but quickly withdrew his hand from the intense heat. "Damn it, Mom's memories, her precious memories." Tears and snot dripping, John repeatedly thrust his hands into the fire. But to no avail, his mother's belongings burned to nothing. "Be careful, dear." I extinguished the fire with a bucket full of water over the remaining ashes. Seeing the unrecognizable remains of his mother's belongings, John collapsed. Why would you do this? You took care of Mom, you cooked meals for me. Yes, all that was to gain your trust. Poor mother-in-law, she couldn't even get her own son to believe the truth. What? Don't tell me you did something to Mom. I didn't do anything, I just took care of her. She was crying with joy, eating the bread I gave her. Bread? You fed Mom bread? That's bad for the brain. It's an American conspiracy to weaken Japan. Cool off with this. I doused him with the remaining water from the bucket over his head. Startled by this sudden attack, John stumbled and fell on his backside in the garden soil. He groaned as if he had twisted his ankle. His appearance was utterly pitiful. Such a foolish family running a company. The employees must have a hard time. I bet your father and grandfather in heaven are crying. Maybe it's better if the company just goes under. I threw the bucket aside towards John. My revenge isn't over yet. Leaving John behind, I walked away from the mansion. I was watching TV in my new home. The morning news was on, with the announcer cheerfully reporting today's weather and horoscope. Suddenly, breaking news interrupted the program. Breaking news: the police are investigating a case of insider trading. Then my phone rang. Hello. It was John on the line. You did it, didn't you? What are you talking about? As I played dumb, John yelled in a frustrated voice. The insider trading thing. That message John accidentally sent me. It was proof of his wrongdoing. Insider trading is when someone with internal company information gives advantageous stock trading information to others, who then use it to make unfair profits. A serious crime indeed. I sold John's message to a weekly magazine. Perhaps because they thought information from the company president's ex-wife was credible. The reporters thoroughly investigated the company and wrote the truth. The scandal involving a well-known large corporation caused a public uproar. And today, the police finally took action. It's your fault. You commit a crime despite running a company. That's none of your business. Besides, do you even have time to call me? Isn't your company in chaos right now? Aren't the police there? Well, John mumbled his response. I could somewhat guess from his reaction. So, you're running away, aren't you? John fell silent. That must be his answer. I sighed deeply. You said it yourself, didn't you? A man's duty is to protect his company by doing a perfect job. I laughed through my nose, making sure John could hear it. Well done, you really did a good job in the end. I sent these heartfelt words of congratulations and hung up the phone. Later, I didn't forget to inform the police about John's call. John was arrested. It turned out he had been regularly engaging in insider trading to maintain relationships with business partners. Ever since John became president, the company's reputation with these partners had significantly worsened. As more companies ceased dealing with them, John resorted to criminal activities to keep the few remaining partners. Who could have imagined that a company passed down through generations would meet such an end? Pitiful. That's the only word I could think of. That night, I was plotting my next move. It still wasn't enough. This wouldn't bring Jack peace. Jack wouldn't forgive me. Engrossed in my farts at the desk, it seems I eventually fell asleep. I was in a dream. Standing in an empty space, I suddenly felt a tight embrace around my waist from behind. I quickly turned around. Jack. Jack was looking up at me with a gentle face. I collapsed on the spot. I'm sorry, Jack, for remarrying. I had a foolish dream that the three of us could be happy together, but Jack. In my arms, Jack shook his head. Mom. Jack gazed at me intently and smiled. Thank you. At that moment, I woke up. Tears were streaming down my cheeks. Remembering Jack's face in the dream, I cried my heart out. Then, a long time passed. In the morning, after getting ready, I headed to the entrance. I gazed at the photo of Jack that was propped up there. Accepting Jack's death isn't something I can do easily. I've heard countless phrases like "don't dwell on the past" or "look forward," but none of them have resonated with me. But at least, I want to live in a way that wouldn't embarrass me in front of Jack in heaven. And when I meet Jack again, I'll tell him everything I've experienced. The things Jack couldn't do, the things he wanted to do, I'll experience them and share it with him. I morphed Jack. I left the house with a smile. The sky was clear and blue, and the sun was dazzling.